everyone. Thanks for coming today. My name is Erin Johnson, and I am a professional counselor with Central Wisconsin Counseling Associates, and today I'm going to talk to you about hoarding. This is a special interest area of mine. It's unique and different, and it poses lots of interesting perspectives and challenges in terms of how this disorder manifests and how it's treatable. Recently, there's been a lot of focus on this because of the reality TV shows. I don't know if you've seen Hoarding Buried Alive or Hoarders. There's been a couple different reality shows surrounding this, which is what brought a lot of attention to the issue. And so now they're actually starting to study it more and starting to look at it as a pretty serious disorder that's impacting a lot more people than what we originally thought. So what makes it a disorder? Well, the main feature of a hoarding disorder is a person's irrational, persistent difficulty in discarding or parting with possessions regardless of their actual value, okay? So it's not just that you're holding on to things that hold sentimental value. It would be applying sentimental value to almost everything, even though there might not really be that value there, and just continuing to collect and collect and collect and never get rid of anything to the point that it actually starts filling homes where the space, the room, cannot serve for the function of what it's supposed to. So bedrooms are not able to be slept in, bathrooms are not able to be showered, or you can't even get access to the sink. So getting to that extreme is usually what puts somebody into this category. So this is the diagnostic criteria taken right from the Diagnostic Statistics Manual, the DSM-5, which just came out this year. Hoarding used to be a diagnosis under the umbrella of OCD disorders, and it was just originally placed in its own category under its own diagnosis with the new DSM-5 came out. Because researchers and professionals in this area looked at hoarding and decided that it was actually much more unique than just what we would see in traditional OCD disorders. So it actually is its own diagnosis now. So what the criteria basically states is that in order to be a hoarder, you have to these categories have to fit the person. Difficulty discarding or parting with personal possessions, even if they have limited value, no value at all. And there has to be this anxiety or distress associated with discarding these items to the point that it actually prevents the person from doing so. The symptoms will result in accumulation of possessions that fill homes, fill garages, prevent you from living in those areas. It can prevent people from even entering those areas. It causes significant distress so that it affects other areas of functioning, the ability to shower, occupationally it will affect this person, socially it affects them. Hoarding symptoms also are not restricted to other mental disorders, so it has to be separate from like a lack of motivation to clean up or other disorders that might fall into there. Even though a lot of times people do have a lack of motivation to clean up because they've been so overwhelmed by this chaos that they've created in their life that it becomes overwhelming for them. But this is the criteria that they have to fit in order to have this diagnosis. So when does it actually become a problem? 3 behaviors characterize hoarding: acquiring too many possessions, difficulty discarding items, and difficulty organizing them, okay? When these behaviors lead to there being enough clutter and disorganization, it tends to affect safety, health, and then distress as well. So typically what we say is it's not really a problem until it's a problem. And with extreme hoarders, it does become an issue. There's family members usually will not visit them, or they've alienated themselves from it because the hoarding has taken over this person's life to the extent that it's too overwhelming for them to deal with, and it's too overwhelming for family to deal with. So it causes a lot of issues that way. So how does hoarding start? It can be different for everybody. Families, it can be a learned behavior. We found that there is a trend. Parents that hoard may have children that hoard, or there may be an uncle or an aunt. It can be kind of a learned behavior in terms of not giving things away, not giving things up. Trauma, this is one that's very commonly seen. Lots of hoarding can manifest itself out of trauma. It fills this emotional hole left by people who've experienced a great loss that they haven't properly dealt with, they haven't properly processed. And so there's this concept of, I never want to lose anything ever again, so I'm going to hold on to everything. And a brain injury, damage to certain parts of the brain can impair decision making. A lot of times we will see hoarding also with people who are just delusional or maybe have dementia. They just, they have acquired things because they forget that they have them, they keep acquiring more, or they just don't have the ability to really work through getting rid of things because they don't have those skills anymore. So why do people hoard? Wanting to avoid wasting things that might have value, okay? They think that it's something that I'm going to use 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. I need this, I'll use it again. And so it gets stored and it gets packed away and it ends up in a corner under maybe 50 pounds of other stuff. And that idea of I'm going to use it again really never comes to fruition because there's just more stuff that keeps getting piled on top of it. Fear of losing important information, like people that hoard magazines or newspaper articles or papers that are completely irrelevant from like 10 years ago, but they need to hang on to them because there might be something there that I need again. The emotional meaning of objects. I've seen people that they lose a child, and so every single one of their child's toys is still in their home because it represents, it's symbolic to them for this is, you know, if I get rid of this, it's like losing my child again. So they've attached this very strong emotional meaning to what those items represent. Or they appreciate the aesthetic appeal of objects, okay? People who are collectors, and that's kind of how they start out hoarding. They start collecting certain objects. They really like them. They really, it's either that they have, it fits what they're trying to collect. So they try to get as many of them as they can, and then they really like them, and it just starts to build and build and build. So why is this disorder so complex, and what makes it a little different from other disorders? First of all, there are core vulnerabilities, including emotional dysregulation, along with family histories of hoarding, generally leading to high levels of perfectionism. It sounds a little strange that you would see a hoarder as being a perfectionist, because if you go into these homes, it pretty much represents anything but perfection. I mean, they're dirty, they're chaotic, they're unlivable, and some homes are just, they need to be condemned. That's how bad it gets. But there is this concept of perfectionism that's usually found in how they are raised or in family history that sort of leads to this mass acquisition of their items and needing to keep things. And emotional dysregulation pretty much means their inability to regulate their emotions and to manage strong feelings of depression, strong feelings of anxiety. People who hoard appear to have difficulty processing information. They've done studies, and I'll actually speak about that in a little bit too, about they've done brain scans of people as they are trying to get rid of possessions, and they found that their ability to process information is a little different than people that don't have a hoarding disorder. So there actually is, the components of the brain do not function in a way that we would consider to be healthy and normal. So there is that element going on that makes it very difficult. People who hoard form intense emotional attachments to a wider variety of objects than other people. So it might seem really arbitrary to just get rid of a plastic fork or maybe a box that you have no use for. For somebody who has a hoarding disorder, it's intensely dramatic, and it can be very damaging for them psychologically for somebody to come in their house and just get rid of it, or for them to just get rid of it. They have this emotional attachment to things, and they just can't seem to make that leap from I have it to, okay, it needs to go in the garbage. People who hoard often hold beliefs about the necessity of not wanting to waste objects and losing opportunities that could be presented by having these objects. So this idea of, I need to keep this hat even though I have 6 other hats just like them. Because in their mind it represents this need and this opportunity that it might become useful again in the future. Even though realistically that's probably not going to happen, just the idea that it could become useful is enough to keep them holding on to it. So this is where they did that study kind of examining the brain. In 2008 they did a study that showed it had hoarders have a unique brain activity and something that's different than from people who have OCD. It suggests that hoarding is associated with impaired decision making, okay? Hoarders wrestled with decisions about their personal items, and the MRI scans showed much more activity in the areas of the brain that control decision making, attention, and controlling emotions, which is really interesting considering that usually hoarders not only have problems in decision making in their life, but also they have attention difficulties. Lots of people with hoarding have ADHD, whether it's diagnosed or not, and then controlling emotions, which kind of gets back to that emotional dysregulation, having a hard time controlling and dealing with anxiety, having a hard time controlling and dealing with depression. And this is just a quote taken by a doctor who has examined hoarding. And out of the study, he said that one problem with hoarding and with OCD is that when the alarm goes off, it becomes more and more important and the brain pays more and more attention to these signals. The person's specific concern becomes more and more salient and other routines and activities become less salient, and that's what's associated with functional consequences. Their lives get smaller and smaller. So basically what he's saying here is that hoarding becomes the center and the core of this person's life. We see people that lose family members, they lose friends, even the idea of showering, bathing on a regular basis becomes no longer as important because the hoarding has really taken over the center of their lives. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the types of hoarders. And there's different subtypes too, but we're just going to talk about kind of the main ones that fall into these categories. Collectors. Collectors typically start off collecting a certain category or group of items. The collection grows to a size where it's considered hoarding to the fact that the collection is interfering with daily functioning of the household. Now, there are people who are collectors who wouldn't fall under the category of hoarding because their collection is maintained and it's organized and it doesn't interfere with the basic functioning of their lives and the basic functioning of their home. And you probably all know people who fall under collectors, but maybe they haven't gotten to that point where it's hoarding. So you can be a collector and still maintain function in your life, but there are people that start out that way and then it gets to the point where it's out of control. And it does start to pose a problem. It poses a significant problem. And then it becomes a disorder because now it is impacting other areas of their life. Shopaholics. You probably know people like this too. The thrill of the bargain creates a high and releases endorphins that gives them that quick boost of happiness. People will often do this kind of like to self-medicate too. I'm feeling bad today, or I'm feeling depressed, and I want to go shopping, I want to go to the thrift store, I want to go to Target and just see what they have, and then it becomes just buying stuff because I can get a good deal, and therefore that makes me happy. These items are not truly needed. But they give that positive rush of feelings, and so it kind of fills that high that the person's looking for. And it gets to the point though where they're buying so much that, I mean, their entire house is almost filled with items that still have tags on it because they weren't items that were needed. They were just items that they enjoyed for that 5 minutes. And then they go into the home and they get stored or they get thrown on top of other items, and that's where they stay. Filth hoarders, these are the people that, if you've ever seen those reality shows, a lot of these types of hoarders come on those are seen on those reality shows. That's because their house has gotten to a point where even the city kind of intervenes, or maybe their landlord intervenes, because there's black mold, there's rat feces, there's cockroaches, there's just an intense amount of garbage. The smells are outrageous. And this is a person who not only has the inability to discard unwanted items, but just garbage in general. They just can't seem to get rid of their garbage. They take time to also rummage through other people's garbage to see what they can find, do some dumpster diving. Everything represents some value to them. I can use this, I can need this. Why would somebody throw this away? Even if I can't use it, it shouldn't have been thrown away, so I'm gonna take it. And they have this inability to decipher waste from items that are, could truly be valuable. So developing a hoarding disorder. People often wonder, how this starts. Well, it actually can start as early as childhood, and usually symptoms are present by adolescence. Typically, they're not diagnosed until the person is in their mid-30s. Why? Well, because hoarding is not typically a problem until it's a problem. So although you might be starting to acquire items in maybe as a teenager or in your 20s, it's not going to get to that point. I mean, it takes a while. It takes a while to fill a home. Even if you're actively trying to do that, it can take quite a while. So it doesn't really become a problem until it really is a problem. And hoarding behaviors may become more ingrained and severe over time. The average age of those seeking treatment for hoarding is 50 years old, which is really a long time if you think about it. I mean, you could be a hoarder for decades before somebody comes to intervene or you identify it as being a problem. And another fact that I wanted to point out is people who do seek help for hoarding. If there is not some sort of psychotherapy involved as they are getting help, as they are purging items out of their home, meaning that they're going to counseling or they're seeing a psychologist and they're getting help to work through issues of depression, trauma, anxiety, if they do not get that help while they're getting rid of items in their home, their recidivism rate, meaning the likelihood to repeat their hoarding, is 100%. There is no documented case of somebody getting rid of items out of their home without seeking extra help and then just being fine for the rest of their life without hoarding again. There needs to be some sort of psychotherapy involved with that process in order for long-term success. Okay, animal hoarding. This is kind of a category within itself because this is people that hoard animals. So it's not necessarily the stuff, but pets or strays that they take in. And there's a different thought process behind this too. So the criteria for this is that they accumulate large number of animals. They fail to provide minimal standards of nutrition, sanitation, veterinary care. They fail to act on the deteriorating condition of those animals. They fail to act on the negative effect of the collection of their own health and well-being. So this is not a person who, we all know people that have lots of pets, but they're taken care of, their homes are taken care of. These are people who constantly have this compulsion to take in more. One more cat, one more dog, and it gets to the point where their homes are starting to deteriorate. None of the animals are getting veterinary care. It's just gotten really bad. So this is sort of the cycle that somebody goes through as they are this is kind of the thought process that's happening for a person who is hoarding animals. And people that start to hoard animals actually have some pretty good intentions. Usually we find that there's a sense of this animal doesn't have a home and I can give it a home and I can love it and they can love me. And then it gets to the point where that relationship reflects back this positive self-image, and then if they get another animal, there's that feeling, that good feeling that comes with it. So then it just keeps cycling and cycling. What happens then is eventually it gets to the idea that I've now taken on too much, but I can't stop. And whether they identify that or not, and some don't, but that's what's happened. 2 cats has turned into 10, 10 has turned into 30, and now they cannot meet the needs of these animals. And these animals are now defecating inside the house. They're tearing up the furniture. And typically these places where this is happening, the ammonia levels are so high in the homes that if there's children in there, CPS can come right in and there would be enough to say that this is a dangerous situation because the ammonia levels have gotten staggering because of all of the urine and the feces in the home. But this person has developed has gotten to a point where they just don't see that. And yeah, they can, I mean, people who are living in it can get used to that smell, and it cannot impose that big of an extreme situation to them, but that's basically what happens. So basically this all comes down to the animals are now facing neglect, okay? And this is usually when there are reports and people can start to intervene because that's what's occurring. Okay, so what makes it very hard to treat? It is very hard to treat. Comorbid conditions, these are conditions that occur in addition to the hoarding. So this chart here indicates, the blue is hoarders, and this chart indicates the people that have hoarding but also have these other diagnoses. So depression, generalized anxiety, social anxiety disorder, ADHD, and substance abuse. So there's all of these other things that can be going on in addition to the hoarding. In fact, some of these things might have even occurred before the hoarding, and the hoarding has now developed in addition to this other issue. And which is why it's so important for people who are trying to get treatment for hoarding to seek psychotherapy services, because they need to deal with these other issues in addition to just getting rid of their stuff. The need for long-term monitoring. It can be very easy for somebody to get treatment for a little while and then go back to recollecting things again. It does not respond well to traditional OCD interventions. So interventions that are typically used for OCD aren't as successful for people who hoard. What are their treatment options? Well, treatment can help people with hoarding disorder decrease their saving, acquisition, and clutter, and live safer. Currently they're trying to develop and research more treatment options. Right now we have 3 that are being used the most: cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure, and response prevention, and medication. Okay. So medication is used to address things like anxiety and depression. That can help, because if somebody is feeling a little less anxious or a little less depressed, it can maybe spur a little bit motivation to kind of take back control of their lives. So SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, those are basically your antidepressants, can help. Some antipsychotic medications can help. ADHD medications can help if that's something that they haven't tried. So that's certainly one form of help that we have seen some success with. CBT, this is where they're working with a psychotherapist and learning how to discard unnecessary possessions with less stress, diminishing their perceived need or desire to save items. They learn to improve their other skills, such as decision making. They can work through a lot of trauma. Oftentimes trauma causes the hoarding. If they can work through their trauma, then they can work through not attaching so much meaning to these items. Exposure and response prevention. This is typically a therapy that's used with people who have OCD, but I thought I would include it because essentially if somebody is going through the process of purging their items in their home and they're working with somebody, this is kind of what's happening. They're being exposed to the event that causes them the most harm and distress. They're being exposed to losing their items. They're watching their items go from their house, where it's probably been for 30 or 40 years, into a dumpster. That's distressing for them, but if they can work through it and work through dealing with that anxiety, they can come out on the other side really realizing that, okay, this wasn't something that killed me, essentially. This is something I can work through. So it desensitizes them, and through the process of habituation, they get used to working through discarding items, and it becomes easier for them to deal with that anxiety as they do it, and for the future too. So basically that fear becomes less and less powerful. Okay. So that's it. That was kind of the basics. Do we have questions?
Can you talk a little bit about how family and friends can actually help with hoarding?
Absolutely. Yeah. So people that do have family and friends that they are at risk of losing, those people, hoarders in that situation, are actually and probably in the best spot because they've got more to lose. They've got some skin in the game at that point. You know, if a person is saying, hey, I'm not bringing my grandkids over to your house, Grandma, because they're in danger if they're over here. That can be a very powerful, that can serve as some very powerful leverage in that situation because people don't want to be put in that situation where they're not allowed to see their grandkids or they're not allowed to see family members because of how their hoarding has affected their lives. So what family members can do is they can seek help from outside resources and get some advice about how to approach things. Oftentimes family members can get together and sort of, in a way, stage an intervention with their family member who is a hoarder and say, hey, this has got to change. Otherwise, we can't come over anymore. We're concerned about your health. And it depends, the approach might be different for everybody in terms of what's going to be most effective for that person. Oftentimes, I mean, and we do get situations where they, if they're facing eviction, that's another motivator too. And friends and family can help come in and work with that person to prevent that from happening. A few things that should never be done is friends and family should not come in and just start taking stuff out without there being a process in place to help. That can cause a lot of trauma to the hoarder. It can cause them also to, now if you had any hope of helping this person and getting them on board with helping themselves, you've lost that because now you've broken their trust. You've come into their place, and although you see their stuff as junk, they see it as this is my personal space with my personal possessions, and you are now eliminating them from my life. You are destroying what I have here. And that is a huge torment to the person, so that should really never be done. The purging and discarding of items has to include that the hoarders, the person who's hoarding has to be involved in that and has to be able to say, okay, this can go and this can stay. And it's helpful if there are professionals there to help them through that decision-making process, but that has to be part of getting rid of their stuff, not going in and just saying, well, today's the day where we're gonna put everything in a dumpster without that person being agreeable to that process. Yeah.
Is there, you have a list of resources here, but is there a place in the city or a resource to give family members? One more than another?
And I know, well, Wood County has a hoarding task force right now that we're all working on, kind of developing resources too. The health department can be contacted. Nancy, who else?
Well, I wish we had our little resource guide.
I know, I just thought about that too.
We've got an available for family members and friends and stuff. We have a list of mental health providers that do work with the condition. People that work with the animals that may be able to help you with the animals part of the situation. Health part of social services. I mean, there's a lot of people that are involved in this kind of thing. EMS is, oftentimes, it's tough for them. They're going into a house and they can't get in, they can't get a stretcher in.
Right.
So there's a lot of people that have been dealing with this. So our resource guide kind of gives people an idea of options and some places that people can go to try and start discarding things. Sometimes it's helpful for them if they know that somebody else can use it, and that's where you can make some of the items. And this person really needs a lampshade. We really need to, these guys can use that. And if they can see that their items are going to a good cause, it's a little easier to give them
Yeah. And it is very, very difficult to motivate somebody who does not see it as a problem, who is not motivated, who is not, I don't have anything to lose. I mean, that is a very difficult situation. I, in a mental health capacity, have a much easier time working with a family, working with an individual who is willing and open to seek help and to identify why this started, how to get better. With somebody who's digging their feet in and not, it's tough. It's really tough to get that person motivated to help themselves and to work through getting rid of their items. So it's, if they've got something to lose, it sounds bad, but that's usually some leverage that they're willing to say, yeah, this is my stuff, but I want to see my grandchildren. Like I don't want them ripped out of my lives because my house has become uninhabitable. So that's usually a good thing to have something like that as a motivator for them.
Do you think most people see themselves as hoarders? I mean, do hoarders see themselves as hoarders or not?
Yes and no. I mean, there are some people that really, you would never know that they were a hoarder. They don't present in any way that would indicate to you that they are a hoarder, but there are people who are, I can't let anybody come in my home, I'm embarrassed of how it looks. So they can see that part of themselves, but there's still that compulsion. So it's almost like there's this tug of war going on within them that says, I know what's going on, but I can't seem to get it under control. And they need help to do that, they really do. If somebody's gotten to this point where they meet that criteria and diagnostically they're a hoarder, I mean, they need that extra help. They can't just turn it around in one day and say, yep, it's gotten, past 12 years I've been hoarding all this stuff and I can't even use my bathroom, but today I'm gonna clean it up and it's gonna change and I'm turning over a new leaf. I mean, it doesn't happen like that. But yes, there are people that do understand that it is that bad, but they just haven't gotten to the point where they're actively seeking out help. And then there are people that don't. They don't know that they are a hoarder. I mean, they can look around and they can see it as a problem, but they can justify almost why everything is the way it is. And so that it's really all kinds. So it just kind of depends. Yeah.
Is there any help out there for people who have no insurance or no funds for psychotherapy?
It's very limited help.
Right now, I think Kay Jewel is still doing those.
Okay, yep.
It's the National Association of Mental Illness.
Yes.
There's classes going on in Portage and Wood, and it's like a three or four session. And there's no charge for that, and it's kind of a support group. Basically, and it's for hoarders and their relatives, families, and people that are interested in it. She did I don't know if she came back after she was injured in August. But she's going to be doing them again in Marshfield, and they will be taped so that you can watch the presentation. But if you go onto their website, and it's Portage County Wood, NAMI, there is some, it's low-cost assistance for that. NAM. NAMI Portage Wood. It's a start. It won't be, it's certainly be a start to getting in the right direction.
Yeah, because it can cost, to get cleanup crews in there and getting that type of assistance where you're trying to get like a comprehensive assistance for helping somebody. Yeah, it can be, be expensive that way too. And certainly if they, some therapists and counselors do pro bono work where they won't, it's okay if you don't have insurance, or they do like a sliding scale fee to work with somebody. But yeah, so there definitely are resources out there, but yeah, just takes some looking too. So.
Send that resource guide to Sammy, and then you can get it out to everybody. It kind of lays out different parties in the community that can assist.
Yeah, the biggest thing is that that there is some sort of mental health help associated with working with somebody who does have hoarding, because it is a mental health disorder, and it's not just, well, we're going to go in the home, we'll clean it up, and everything's going to be good. It doesn't work that way. There's usually lots of underlying issues that need to be dealt with.
And this resource guide has links or resources resources for family to understand what's going on. Because, families just say, we got to do this, we got to do this now. And it's self-determination, the
Yep.
person has the right to live like that.
Right.
They want to.
Yeah, and at the county level, they do a lot of APS reports. So, and unfortunately, legal services can go in and they can do their assessment, but they can say this person is a competent individual making choices that you might not agree with, but they have every right to live like this. So it comes down to that person who is hoarding if they want that help, Yeah.
Well, the public health ordinance does address the issue. It's just that it's hard for us to work with. So if there's a family member that can help the situation, it'll help. But otherwise, it's just finding and getting them out of the house. But that has helped because it's out of the house, got the house cleaned up, got the house out of the family trust, and they were able to sell the house afterwards and get some money out of it and help the situation. So there is a public health ordinance, so if there's family members that are willing to help, we can get them out of the house. But we don't like to just find them because that's not helping the situation.
Right.
And sometimes when we get involved, it's because there's a crisis. If it's a rental situation, that's when somebody's going to be, lose where they're living because all of a sudden the landlord realizes that my house is just a total mess. So, when that happens, that is the incentive that I was talking about that may help the hoarder realize I got to do this or I'm going to lose my house or I'm going to lose all my cats or I'm going to lose my dogs. And it's an added push, but then we also need, we need family members to help with that, and we also need, the mental health counseling to go along with it. But there's a number of us within the county that address this, but in different ways. But our end is more, I think, it's more of the enforcement of that public health. So when we go in and do something like this, we made officer about a lot of times there are animals and pets and things like that. So it's kind of a group effort to try and, okay, this is crisis now we need to do something. And we try and make it that way.
Yeah, and family members, it is they can get really frustrated with the process. Why aren't they cleaning up fast enough? Why is this so difficult for them? They can actually trigger their family member who's hoarding to get very angry and very defensive, and it can really backfire if they don't come in with the right approach. And that's where a mental health professional can assist the family in getting the right approach so that they don't push that person who's hoarding even farther away. Because then you're just backsliding at that point. So, okay.
We see a lot of it. It's not uncommon. So, hoping it's going to go away. I'm just addressing it.
Yep. Okay. Anything else? All right. Sure.